My half-brother is coming at my neck for my inheritance, but hey, he doesn't have any claim, any right to it, but you will not believe when my stepfather sides with him. I'm telling you, this is crazy, but I have a trick up my sleeve they weren't ready for. I'm 34 and female. I'm the only child from my mother's first marriage with my father. My mother and father had a really messy divorce when I was 4, and my mother remarried my stepfather very soon after. I haven't heard from my father since I was 10 years of age, and I've made no effort to contact him since. I have one brother who resulted from my mother's second marriage to my stepfather. He's 25 and we aren't very close. My mother passed away 10 years ago to breast cancer. It was really hard on my brother as he was only 15 when this happened. My stepfather suffered a lot afterwards too, and I also had to become the breadwinner for the family for 3 months before he was able to pull himself together and go back to work. I'm very close with my stepfather and I love him a lot, but he's always drawn a line between us. He loves me too and is very vocal about it, very affectionate, but he's always made sure that I know that he is not my father. This hurt a lot when I was younger, but I've moved past it now as an adult. When my mother died, she had about $50,000 in savings. That was split between my brother and me. He was only 15, so the money was put away so that he could access it when he was 18. But I used mine to pay off my student loans right away. Once my brother turned 18, he pretty much wasted all his money away before he even went to college. So now he's in considerable amount of debt, and I'm debt-free and have a good job. A week ago, I received a call from a lawyer. My biological father died, and as I was with his only child, his assets would be given all to me. Guys, he had over $1 million in assets, all of which were sold upon his request after he died. I now know that I'm really, really rich, with no idea what to do with all of it. I'm in a lot of emotional turmoil at the moment, just because I hadn't even known my father was sick and his death came very suddenly. I have to mourn him without really having to know him, and now I have all this death money, and I feel like I should have done something noble with it, like donate it to breast cancer charity for Mom. But I also want to just live my best life. I have no debts to pay, and I'm good with money. I could invest this and make it last my entire life. When I first got the news, I did what anyone would do when they suddenly have millions of dollars. I went on the biggest night out with my friends I could think of. I flew us all out to Vegas, and we went crazy for a few days. Now, I'm back home and I haven't even spent a chunk of my inheritance. If all that isn't enough, as well as the money, my dad wrote me a letter that would be delivered in the event of his death. I just got it in the mail yesterday, and he revealed some things about my mom that I had no idea about. Mom always spun the divorce idea between her and Dad as some sort of mutual separation and made it all seem very calm. But she always told me that it was my father who decided that he did not want to see me anymore. I would see him sporadically throughout my childhood. He'd show up every second birthday and sit in a corner moodily. Then he would give me a big expensive present while glaring at my mother and stepdad. I never paid much attention to him as a kid. He was just a guy who brought gifts, and when I was a teenager, I started to struggle with abandonment issues. As any teen girl would without a father, right? My mom sat me down and told me that it's not my fault, that my father was just not a good man, and that I was better off without him anyways. Well, I believed all this up until now when I got my dad's letter. Apparently, he had not wanted the divorce at all. It was less than mutual. According to my dad, he was head over heels in love with Mother, willing to do anything for her. He agreed to be a stay-at-home father so that she could work when she began struggling with postpartum depression. Once my mom went back to work, she met my stepfather. Apparently, he was her manager at the company she worked at, and they hit it off right away. In the letter my dad sent, he said that my mom began to have an affair with my stepfather behind his back when I was 2 years old. So, he would be at home, taking care of me and tending the house, while she would be having, quote, business meetings with her boss in a motel every weekend. Eventually, my dad found out and told my mom that she had to stop her affair or he'd leave her. He says that he was hoping that she'd come to her senses and break things off with my stepdad, but she did not. She left my dad in a heartbeat and married my stepfather the next year. My dad said that he tried to get custody of me, but the courts have a bias towards mothers, so I ended up in my mom and stepdad's care. My dad tried to get visitation, but my mom blocked him as much as she could, and that's why he could only show up at birthdays. Apparently, Dad never loved another woman, and that's the reason he never had any more kids. He died with a broken heart, if the letter is to be believed. Listen, I'm taking this all with a grain of salt, I know. I've heard my mom's side of the story all my life, now I'm hearing my father's. I have no doubt that both parties are embellishing things, leaving things out and editing the narrative to make themselves seem more sympathetic. It's just that, until now, I'd never even heard my father's side. And that's why it's throwing me for an absolute loop. I asked my stepdad if it was true that my mom and he had been having an affair behind my dad's back, and he got all moody and sullen. But finally he admitted it was the truth. I was upset enough, honestly. My childhood was being turned upside down on itself. Everything I believed about my parents, relationships, and divorce proved to be untrue. It was then, though, that my little brother decided to get involved. He called me up the other night, trying to be casual, but I knew he had something on his mind. He barely ever calls me, and we usually text once or twice a month, and he had this crappy tone in his voice. He asked me about work, how I was doing. But when I finally snapped at him and told him to cut to the chase, he blurted out that I should give him half of my inheritance. I didn't even know what to say. I hadn't even told him about my dad's death or the money. The only person I told was my stepdad. But clearly, he'd gone running to my brother to tell him. I should have known better than to talk to my stepdad about it. He's always just some sort of pushover when it comes to my little brother. But I just wanted to get to the bottom of the situation and sort out my thoughts. I laughed at first. I really thought he was joking, but he wasn't. He got all ratty with me when I laughed and told me that it isn't fair that I get so much money, especially when he's the one who's in debt and unemployed, when I have a well-paying job. I was in awe at the audacity of this kid. Really? Who did he think he was? I said as much and he started crying. He was making these fake sobbing noises, wailing that he was in so much trouble. He owed so much money, but I wasn't buying it. The waterworks might work on my stepfather, but they don't on me. I've watched this kid grow up into the spoiled, entitled brat that he is. Once he realized that the tears weren't going to cut it, he changed tactics. He started yelling at me, really bellowing over the phone, telling me that I was a selfish jerk, saying really, really nasty, horrible things. He said it's no wonder my dad abandoned me, and that he understood how my mom would leave my dad if he was anything like me. This didn't get to me either, honestly. I was just sitting on my couch with my phone at my arm's length while he screamed at me. He clearly had not got the full story from his dad if he was bringing up my dad abandoning me. I'd like to say that he would not have the audacity to speak to me that way if he'd known that his father was the reason my parents broke up. That I was left without a father for my entire life, but I think that would be expecting too much of him, right? Well, he was grasping at the end of the phone call, out of breath after his tirade, and I was just in shock. Yeah, I mean, we've never been close, but he's still my brother. Never until now have I thought of him as my half-brother. He was never anything but my little bro. But now I'm really reevaluating that, and I knew he was spoiled, and I knew he liked to push his dad around, but I never thought that he'd have the nerve to try it on me. I guess I've always given him a pass for being emotionally stunted and immature, because he was still a kid when Mom died. But honestly, he has some balls to speak to me like that. When Mom died, my stepdad was in bed for months, and I had to be the one to take care of everything. I paid the bills, I drove my brother to school, I cleaned the house, I brought my stepdad his meals 3 times a day, and took them back untouched and after a few hours. I washed this kid's gym socks, and he has the audacity to cop an attitude with me, now not sharing something he has no claim to? Yeah, I'm done with him. I feel betrayed by my stepfather also for running and telling my brother my business as soon as he heard it, like it was a fresh gossip off the press, rather than real and actual real emotional turmoil I was going through. But I shouldn't be surprised. Even before Mom died, my brother has walked all over his father and gotten whatever he wanted. I'm pretty sure my stepdad still pays his bills for him, and I know for a fact he does his laundry. This has just made it clear that those two are their own separate family, and I'm on my own now, to be honest. I'm going to call my stepfather tomorrow and talk to him about this. I doubt he's even on board with the crazy plan. He's soft to my brother's face, but he's always working behind the scenes to offset all his crazy ideas. I'm going to ask him how I should deal with this. There's no part of me that wants to share my dad's money with my brother. I think he met my dad maybe 3 times in his entire life. Well, the thing is, if my brother had asked for a loan, I would have given it to him without a second thought. I would have even paid off his debt and his student loans without even expecting him to pay me back. Heck, I was half considering it before he even called me. But now he's not getting a dime. He's greedy, and he flew too close to the sun, and now he's paying for it. I honestly don't even think I'm the a-hole in this situation, but I know that people here are super active, so I thought I'd put a post up, just getting everything off my chest. I've talked to my friends about it, obviously, but I need the opinion of unbiased strangers of the interweb. I don't need you guys to tell me if I'm in the wrong or not, because I know for a fact I'm not. I'm just hoping you guys can maybe give me some advice on how to handle the situation effectively and communicate that my brother is not getting $1. Update number 1. So, I called my stepdad out for lunch to discuss everything, and things did not go as planned. He actually thinks that I should split the money with my brother. He said that it would be selfish not to. I'm in shock. I always knew that my stepdad loved my brother more than me, and I got over that a long time ago. It's natural to have a preference for your own child, but never in my life did I expect him to be so blatant about it. My entire life, he's made sure that I don't call him dad, and he's told me that he isn't my father. Let me know, in the gentlest and kindest possible way, that when he dies, I won't be getting a single thing from him. Not even one little bit. Well, but now when it comes to his own son, he's flipping the script. Apparently, it's not fair for my brother to be in debt and me not to be, when we both got money when Mom died. I asked him how it made sense for me to give my money up when I'm the one who paid off my student loans, and he's the one who blew his inheritance from my mom on video game consoles and sneakers, then had to sell them all 3 years later to make rent. Well, the logic seemed to be going in one of my father's ears and out the other, bouncing around in his seemingly empty skull for a while and flying out the other, because he was completely ignoring my point. So, I have 3 days to transfer half the money to my brother, or I'm dead to him. His words, not mine. I don't think these bozos have ever considered the fact that they're going to get taxed on this so hard that they'll barely even see a cent. I don't have to pay taxes on my inheritance because there's no inheritance tax in my state. But there sure is transfer your brother over $1 million tax. Well, the pair of them are clueless about money and neither are good at saving. They're just being greedy. I don't even know why my stepdad is lobbying for my brother, when we both know that he won't be seeing a cent of that money if I do give in, which I won't. I tried to explain to him the double standard in expecting me to give half of my inheritance to my brother, when it's been made clear to me from the day one that my stepdad met me that I won't get a thing when he dies. But he just rolls his eyes. I pretty much shut down after that. I stopped responding to all his dumb arguments and I pretty much just retreated into myself. I think he could tell that I wasn't listening because he left pretty soon after. I know for a fact that the first thing he did when he left the restaurant was call my brother and update him on the situation. Because not even 10 minutes later, I get a call from him. I was considering letting the phone ring to send him a message, but I wanted to know what he had to say. He was doing the fake sobbing again, and I just couldn't take him seriously. I told him that if he was so desperate for an inheritance, He should go and wait for his own father to die, and I hung up the phone. I do feel like that might have been a bit too harsh. I really do. But at this point, I really don't know how else to impress upon the bozos that they're not getting a dime from me. Not in a million years. Obviously, I don't wish death on my stepdad. He helped raise me, for goodness sakes, but the way he's been behaving right now is absolutely insane. He should know better. The thing is this. I would have expected this kind of thing from my brother. He hates it when other people just get things and he doesn't. Mom and Dad used to have to buy him his own present on my birthday, or he would throw a fit and break things out of rage and jealousy. Whenever I commented on how unfair it was that he got something on my birthday, but I got nothing on his, I was told that I'm older and much more mature. Well, this is pretty much par the course for this kid. It's not like I knew that he was going to do this. Even if I didn't think he had this much audacity, I was sure he would whine and moan behind my back about how unfair the whole situation actually was. I did not think he'd launched this immature attack on me. It's the way my stepdad is acting that's really getting me down. I loved him like a father all my life. He raised me. He came to all my dance recitals, brought me horse riding. He did everything a father does. Sure, he always told me that he was not my father, but it did hurt. But in my head, he was my father figure. I always knew he preferred my brother, but I didn't expect him to take his side so aggressively like this. I'd expect him to pretend to be sympathetic to my brother, pat him on the back and tell him he was right. It is unfair, but I would have thought he'd secretly been on my side. My stepdad has never taken such an obvious side with my brother before. That's the problem. When we fought as kids, he would send me to my room, even if I wasn't the one in the wrong. But he would always sneak up to see me later and just apologize, give me a hug and tell me I was right. Sometimes he'd even bring up a chocolate bar and tell me not to tell my brother. That's the kind of thing I expected. He always took my brother's side when he was in the room. But he always let me know privately that I was right. That's why I'm so taken aback for all this. I haven't been in my room with both my brother and stepdad at the same time in 6 months? So why the heck is my stepdad still putting on this performance? He's not a stupid guy. He has to know that I don't owe my brother anything. Anyways, here's my little update. I'm in the car right now, I just left the restaurant, and I thought you guys might be curious about how everything's been working out. I highly doubt that this is the end of it, so I'll probably be back on here soon to update. Thank you. Update number 2. I was right when I said things would not be over yet, but even I'm shocked at what this little rat did. Guys, he called the cops on me. I got a call yesterday afternoon from a cop asking me to come to the station and give a statement, because my brother is trying to get me arrested for not giving him his rightful heir. I'm in amazement. I seriously am. He didn't even tell the cops the whole story, obviously. He just said that I owed him money and refused to pay him. So, when I explained the real situation, the poor cops were so embarrassed that they made me come down to the station. They apologized so much. I thought they were going to get on their knees or something. I had to show them emails from my dad's lawyers that specifically stated I am my dad's only child. Then I showed them texts from my brother and my stepdad that say right there on the screen that they weren't related to my birth father in any way. So, I went home and I called my brother right away. I didn't even get the little rat a chance to speak. I just yelled at him louder than I've ever yelled at anyone in my life. I called him spoiled. I called him a brat. I told him he should be on his knees thanking me for the holiday, the family together, when my mom died. I aired out every grievance I've ever had with him, and then I told him never to call me again. It felt good. It felt cathartic, but I was still in a blind rage. I called my stepdad, and I know people are going to think I'm dumb for this, but I called him expecting him to know what my brother had done. I thought if he finally realized what an idiot my brother was being and how far he was taking all this, I thought that he would come to his senses and finally rein in his child, but oh no. He's known all about it. The jerk actually suggested it. I'm just shaking with anger right now. I'm trying to keep my language in check. I know there are kids on here, but I'm just so angry. I feel let down. I feel betrayed. But the hurt's like 25% of what I'm feeling now, and the rest is just pure rage. Who the heck are these guys to act like they owed a piece of my inheritance? The only thing left from my father, who is my stepfather, to be the reason my dad died with a broken heart. The very man my mom cheated on my dad with, and then disrespect him even more from the afterlife? The audacity of these idiots is astounding. They have zero credibility in this, and I have that from the mouths of 3 cops who were just as shocked as I was when their idiocy came to light. They're dead to me, and I don't feel guilty saying it. I'm officially disowning them as family members, as far as I'm concerned. After the deaths of my mom and dad, I was left with nobody. No family at all. I don't care what kind of trouble they get into. I don't care if it's the mafia's threatening to cut their fingers off. Neither of them ever have the right to ask me for money. Well, sorry for the big rant. When I hung up on my stepdad yesterday, I called up a few of my friends and went to the bar right away. I drowned my anger in everything I could find. And I'm only sobering up and coming to my senses now. I was enraged yesterday, then I drank till I blacked out and forgot about it. Well, now I'm back to enraged again today. Unfortunately, I don't think it's healthy to get blackout drunk 2 days in a row to run from your troubles. So, instead, I'm trying to find catharsis by writing everything down to share with you all. Good people. Well, it's not working. And going back over everything is just bringing me right back. Thanks anyways. Update 3, final update. Well, I had to call the cops. That's a really dramatic first line, I know that, but I just wanted to get it out of the way before I jump straight into this. It's been 8 months since I last posted that update, and I was expecting everything to go back to normal, but good goodness, it did not. At the end of my phone calls with both my brother and my stepdad, I told both of them not to contact me ever again. I was happy enough to just cut them out of my life, no questions asked. I don't know why I expected them to actually listen to me though. Probably just some naiveness lingering and affection for them, but that's gone now. They both called me nonstop. Every time I went to sleep, I woke up with hundreds of text messages from them. So many missed calls. Calls I couldn't even count. The tone of them ranged a lot, went from pleading to anger to telling me mom would be disappointed in me for leaving my brother out. I thought they'd stop with time, lose their momentum maybe. Oh no, they didn't. After a week of this, I blocked both of their numbers. I don't know why I waited a week, but I did. After a few days apiece where I thought it was over, they started calling me on new numbers. I didn't recognize them, so I did answer the phone. Unfortunately, when the angry text started coming in, I put 2 and 2 together again, and I blocked them again, and they got new numbers. I was kind of scared at this point. It's been 2 months of continuous harassment. Eventually, I gave in and got a new number myself, in hopes that they've been stopping calling if the number they had disconnected, but oh no, of course not. I had to update everybody at work, all my friends, cousins, and somehow they got a hold of my new number. I don't know if someone gave it to them or what, but at this point I was starting to feel unsafe. At the same time as their phone calls, I started getting strange letters in the mail. Threatening ones. There were knocks on my door in the middle of the night. I was a mess, honestly. I didn't know what to do. This was just so far outside of my realm of possibilities I could ever have come up with. It's like I didn't recognize these people. I don't know. I tried calling the cops a few times, but they just always told me that there's no crime being committed, so there's nothing that they could do. It was definitely scary. I always heard people say that money changes people, but I never imagined that people in my life would go this far. I ended up moving houses. Thanks to the money that started this mess, I managed to buy an apartment in a different part of town. It's nicer, and I'm closer to my friends, so I am happy with it. I just had to get out of that last place, because I didn't feel safe knowing that they knew where I lived. Especially with the strange noises and the knocking on my door at 4 a.m. I changed my phone number again too, and this was about 2 months ago. Everything calmed down these past 2 months. I was more careful with who I gave my number to. And, well, I made sure to only tell close friends where my new apartment was. I thought that everything had blown over, and I was finally starting to relax. But a few days ago, things changed, and it got bad again. I was out for an hour or two getting groceries, then I had lunch with a friend. When I got home, my door had been kicked in. Someone broken into my home and trashed the place. I called the cops, and finally they were able to do something to protect me. My brother and stepfather were arrested. I don't think that they were the ones who broke in, but I'm 100% sure that they paid somebody to do it. I'm fine if they rot away in prison. The cops found texts between them planning all this harassment, so there's evidence at least, and I've been told that my best option is to file a restraining order. What really bugs me is that I don't know who it was that told them my new address. Now, on top of losing a brother, my stepdad, and my birth father, I'm going to have to comb through my close friends, one by one, try to figure out which one of them is the rat, and put my safety in danger. I'm definitely pressing charges. I don't care if I have to pay for an amazing lawyer. I'm not letting them get away with this at all. I'm going to use the money they wanted and hire the best therapist in state while they're rotting. I'm going mad like crazy. This was kind of a wild ride, I know. I just want to say that I appreciate all you guys for sticking it out with me through it all. My final piece of advice is, y'all, to this. If you come into a lot of money, don't you tell a soul. Alright guys, I just felt so bad for OP during this story. I mean, she literally lost everybody that she cared for. But the ones that were cracking me the most were the half-brother and the stepfather. And also the friend at the end who turned out to be a rat and gave away all her information. That's 3 loved ones that OP is now just cutting out of her life, all because of jealousy and money. Has to do with the inheritance always. Now, if you've been with the channel for quite some time, you would know how many sticky inheritance stories we've seen, but this one might be the worst because it was just so obvious from the get-go. They were after her money. Let me know your thoughts on this story, guys. I would love to know. What would you have done if you were in this position? Would you said, you know what? I am going to help you out. I'm not going to give you half of it because that's absurd, but I'm going to pay for your student loans to make sure you're not in debt, and I'm going to give you a little bit more cash. Or would you go the route that OP went and said, you know what? This is my money. You're not entitled to it at all, and you should have asked nicely. That would be really interesting if you guys dropped that in the comment section. My husband is a piece of crap. He abandoned me and our baby. Which, by the way, it took a lot of tries to have a baby. He doesn't care. He said that he doesn't even want us in his life. Well, I got some news for him. His father has been really sick for some time, and he's just ignoring his own dad. Doesn't even want to go and help him. Well, long story kind of short, his father passed away. And guess who he left the entire inheritance to? Well, I'll give you a hint. It wasn't my husband. My husband Robert and I got married 9 years ago, after dating for 2 years. See, we both live in a relatively small town. I used to tell people that we have a storybook romance. We care for each other, talked endlessly, had great romance, great friends, and traveled a lot. For the last several years, I supported him while he went through law school, and finally, after landed his dream job, I could relax a bit. Flash forward 1 year, and he's not loving his job at all. Of course, big law is a lot of work, and he's already burnt out of it. He eventually decided to take some time off and soul search about his next career move. During this time, he decided to take a week away in Madrid, just to clear his mind a bit. Well, when he got home, he was acting strangely and was very distant. When I confronted him about it, the next day he admitted that he fell in love with someone else in Madrid. And when I asked him to stop talking to this person, he refused. He would not stop talking to a person that he only knew for 7 days, to preserve his marriage with somebody that he has loved unconditionally for 9 years. But at this point, I was already in the most vulnerable state. My binder of medical bills was 3 inches thick. From my first pregnancy to the day of our firstborn coming home from the NICU. With that in mind, I just accepted it at a blanket reason for everything each time. he would reopen that wound about how expensive it was for all that, how it's going to be more expensive the next time. Robert and I struggled with fertility issues for years. We then started a new method, IVF, and hopes to get at least one child together. Note that I saved for the majority of treatment while my husband only paid $2,000 to $3,000. We saved up for another round after a huge disappointment and heartbreak from failing the first time. Well, that's just how it goes. This time I'd put all the money, including my family's, and my husband did not even pay a cent. When our daughter was born, he didn't even care to visit the baby. I also had to pay out of pocket and was out of money, so I asked him if he could drop me off some dinner or order me some delivery. I did not ask him to contribute to paying for the hospital. He sounded really annoyed on the phone, claimed he did not have the money and he was out with his cousin at the bar in the burbs and won't be home tonight. Told me that I can eat whatever I have at home. Well, I was pretty much out of food, so ramen or canned soup it was. He did not even care that I had a major medical procedure and can't even afford food. I just wanted a comforting takeout meal to help with feeling like utter crap, and he could not even do that for me. I'm at the worst at picking men. I hate him, and I hate myself for not choosing a better partner. Well, I soon found out that he even secretly pulled out $7,000. We had $11,000 in total, and I was completely and utterly shocked. I confronted him, and he casually reminded me on how many times his best friend complained about his, quote, old junk car, and he decided to lend him $7,000 to buy a decent car. His argument was that his friend would have done the same for him. I was beyond livid. I asked if he really thought that was okay, and he said that I should not worry and guarantee that his friend will pay us back in time. I lost it on him, and immediately demanded his friend send the money back and threatened police involvement in case he refused. Well, his friend immediately returned the money, but told my husband about the police thing, and my husband came home and yelled at me, calling me unhinged and selfish. I told him I saved up some of this money for his treatment, while he contributed nothing, even though we were in this together. He, quote, corrected me, saying I'm the one with the problem and he thought it was only fair that I, quote, make up for it by paying for the IVF myself. This hurt so badly, and I couldn't even argue anymore. He went to stay with his friend while constantly shaming me for how I treated them both, and for the police involvement like they stole from me or something. I went home to my parents for a week, and while on our laptop I found journal entries, intended for his therapist that he'd written while on vacation in Madrid about these affairs that he's been having. He also wrote about how he has never felt passion with me, and how he doesn't think our love is even compatible. Financially speaking, started my marriage with my husband completely debt-free, and I've worked for years to finally get him to be debt-free as well, and I've managed the finances full-time for all 3 years straight. He used to manage our finances too, but he has a history of sabotaging our financial goals and blowing up our budgets. He drained our accounts, leading us to homelessness 3 separate times. Letting us become homeless because an adult family member cannot be the responsible enough person to pay his own bills, or get into legal trouble is a hard thing for me to fully understand and wrap my head around. Before he did this, he had been looking at multitudes of things that, well, on a regular day, we definitely could not afford. He used credit or saved up on money for weeks or months. He had made it clear that intends to buy a new vehicle, tech, Airstream, game system, and other items just for him, not to improve our family's future at all. Well, a person can wish for stuff or want to work towards a treat for themselves, but he had not made an effort to save up for these expensive purchases at all. When I talk about investing or saving, he says that life is too short for that. I told him that it was not about us, it was about Laura. And his response was that when Laura became an adult, she should work for what she wants. That statement seems backwards considering his actions as of lately. I really didn't want to wake up one day and find out that every cent has been spent behind my back. I told him I would like to open an account in my name and follow through with the plan. Well, a huge argument followed, and he gets angry. He goes on a rant about how I was dragging him down, how I was ungrateful, how most women would be ecstatic to be in the position I was in, and how he would find someone who could be grateful. I told him I do all the late-night feedings and take care of the baby during the day while he works. I begged him to just try taking care of the baby for a few days because I'm exhausted and stressed. He proceeds to insult me, then insults the baby. I told him, actually calmer than I thought I could be, that neither of us deserve these words right now. So, he packed up his clothing and put it in a storage and has been in Europe with his new lover since. He told me he doesn't care about me, our marriage, or our daughter. Then told me that he will not be coming home and just left. I'm still in shock a month later. I had to scramble to find a cheap place to live, move all of our stuff alone, and search for a full-time job. All the while he's in Europe, not working and traveling with his new lover. I had no idea what to do. I felt depressed. I felt stuck. I felt broken, humiliated, and emasculated. But my daughter needed me, and I needed to be strong for her. But I had no job and no childcare for the baby. It was just the two of us. My savings were beginning to run low, and the rent was coming up. So, I canceled the insurance, bank accounts, and cable, and his phone is next. Only thing that's requested for him to provide me with is a new cell phone number before he left, and he did not. He was also driving around with no car insurance. Fortunately, we soon had help, but not from my parents, but from my mom's eldest brother. He gave me a month's rent and basic groceries and even got me a job. Found an apartment nearby too. I will be in debt to him and his wife forever for all their help. Just after a few months, Robert started talking like he had made a mistake and wanted to come back. And I said, of course, you have a place here and I will forgive you. And my heart sang because he was coming back to me. Only he did not. He hemmed and hawed, and sometimes he was on the side of coming back, and sometimes he was on the side of staying with her. But every time he said he was coming back and then didn't, it was like he was leaving me all over again, tearing open the wound and making it fresh. It took an embarrassing long time for me to tell him that I was done with that game, and that I no longer wanted him back. And, well, he would have to find peace with his new situation. I felt broken and used and completely alone. I kept reliving the last 9 years, and I can't see how I could have seen this coming. He told me every day how much he loved me, and how he would do anything for our love. How do you go from fighting over who will die first so we don't have to live without the other, and him telling me he wants to have children to this? I mean, I'm 37 years old and can't see myself ever investing in a long relationship like this again after sinking my literal heart and soul into this marriage and being tossed aside like a fool. However, his parents are nothing like him, and, I was raised in a Christian household. With that came gender roles that were ingrained in me at a very young age. My in-laws, however, hated that my parents taught us this way. Because of this, I became very close with my in-laws, especially my father-in-law instead of my own parents. Even after Robert left us, we were in touch now and then. Well, for more info, which is important, my in-laws lived in a beautiful house that had no neighbors, many trees, and a garden. They paid off the house after years and was very special to them. My father-in-law also had bad problems with his back, and a condition that would get worse until he couldn't go anymore. After my mother-in-law passed, he got worse and ended up needing at-home care. He didn't want to be a stranger in his home, so that was not an option. I think it was due to my grandmother's passing. Robert said he would not be able to take care of him and was planning on putting him in an old age home, I decided to stay with him since it would just be easier. My job can be worked effectively at home, and he'd get care from someone who was not a total stranger. In the time I took care of him, we filled the home with love and laughter my father-in-law brought to it. We used to toss cupcakes at the wall to see what could get the most to stick the furthest. Winner got to have the cake, but we always ended up sharing. He's the world's greatest practical jokester. I could tell infinite joke stories. As my father-in-law got worse, not a single call. Not from his son, siblings, or extended family. We were joking about it once, and he said, "Maybe I should just give you, Missy, the house name, instead of your husband." He laughed after he said that, so I just assumed he was joking. Fast forward. The worst happened. I was the one who found him. I had to make the call. All of it. Well, as much as I was pushed away from Robert, I did not want to find out the news from a random person, so I was the one who told him. The funeral was the first time I saw him after he abandoned me and Laura. We had no idea where he's been all these years, but then it came time for the will. Now, it wasn't some telenova with all the dramatics, but let me tell you, it was intense. The house that was supposed to be Robert's became mine as well as a large sum of money, and many other things that my father-in-law planned on giving to his son. Well, the executor of my father-in-law's estate contacted me before the funeral. Although it's $1.5 million, according to her. My intention is to use half of my inheritance money to move our family into the house and renovate it. Then save 40% to help my daughter in the future, like graduations, college, trips, her first car, etc. And have a small emergency fund. I'm not sure if I'm making the right choice, but I really just want my daughter to have the same happy and stress-free childhood I had. When I told Robert about the will, with my name in it, it also states that Robert can claim the inheritance only if I consented. I was accused of manipulating his father into giving it to me, and he was just yelling and screaming at me. He made an offhanded comment about how nice it must be to be rich overnight. Well, it was intense. For a second before some gentleman told him to show me some respect. This started a much larger fight, though. People who would not lift a finger for a loved one and yet entitled to their things after they're gone would definitely see this as some sort of manipulation. Well, not because it is, but because it fits their narrative. I was the one who cried and held my father-in-law's hand as he died. Who told him how much he was loved in the hours leading up to the moment, who had cleaned him up after he passed, helped put him on the funeral home stretcher, chose the outfit that he'd be buried in, and walked next to him for honor guard as he left our house for the last time. I loved him. My co-workers loved him, and his son was just so callous. He abandoned his wife and daughter and even neglected his own father's needs for decades. Robert's been since making snide remarks about how I took advantage of his dad's sickness by stealing his inheritance. Every time he makes this type of snide remark, it really sets me off, and we get into an argument about the will and other things. For some reason, he has this idea that he should be getting the money. He says that it doesn't matter if his dad was emotionally weak, but he deserves his father's money. The next morning, he told me he wants me to sell my inheritance, so he can make some non-vital house repairs and possibly go on a vacation to get distracted from the sorrow. Well, I laughed, more out of anger than anything else, and told him that he had no right to suggest how to make the use of the inheritance that my father-in-law left when he refused to even visit him when he was sick. I got a call from his aunt, who was extremely angry. She called me irrational and told me that since I am not his blood relation, I have no right to receive property or money from him, and that the inheritance gives Robert the opportunity to return some of the money he spent on me and Laura. What the? He's bringing this topic up 1 to 2 times per week for the last month since my father-in-law's passing, and it's just increasingly making me mad. My response have ranged from, "My father-in-law just died," I don't want to think about this right now. So it's his, and I'm not going to try to take his will away. Oh, but he said that since we're married, I can't just make that decision myself, because technically, that inheritance would belong to him. I don't know when Robert got so greedy. He just could not wait to stick his hands in his dead father's pockets. He could not even give me time and space to grieve because he was so eager to profit from his death. Well, I gave selflessly, expecting nothing in return, and I just wanted the good man to spend his last days in the home he loved, surrounded by his memories. I earned what was given to me by a man of principles. My father-in-law gave it to me. He wanted me to live in a house he loved and lived on, and he wanted to give all that to me. Giving it away to someone who insulted him and treated him at less is almost as an insult to his memory, huh? Robert has had everything handed to him on a silver platter, and even now feels entitled to what someone else put in the work for. For the first time in his life, his golden boy privileges was worthless. How creepily self-centered can it get? Well, I also told him, don't you dare dishonor a great man in order to cater to a lesser man like yourself. That would be a slap in the face to your dad. I will honor him by being strong and thinking for myself and not bending to the wants of awful people. I will fill the home that he loves so much with memories and keep him close. After this, he began using sweeter tones and literally begged me to give him the money, saying I can keep the house if I want, but he really needs the cash urgently. Well, I have a dilemma about the money Jack left me. I haven't touched the money yet. It's mine legally, and will let me have a fresh start when I move back. I've never seen him beg someone like this, or a woman he left at the time of her need, for that matter. I wonder if it's karma that's brought Robert to this point. Update number 1. Thank you all for the outpouring support and advice. I can't tell you how comforting this is to hear your stories of healing and continued happiness after something like this has happened to you. I'm taking all your advice to heart. Well, you're correct. I live in the United Kingdom. That's really the most I care to say. I spent 2 days lining up appointments for the first week of October. I found a divorce attorney, a financial advisor, and a bank that's a bit out of the way. Some things to clarify. A lot of people asked how I did not divorce him after all these years, and he wasn't like this while we dated and after we got married. It probably started midway through my 4th pregnancy, with our now firstborn. It made sense that all of the trouble we faced just to have a child could have drained us, and I believe this because we kept all our bills paid and filed away. I'm still married because my situation is so cut and dry. I had to dig our family out the hole and got an apartment, got a job with someone's help, and built a life slowly. Well, now that I'm financially stable, I asked him for a divorce, finally. But he refused to sign. I firmly stood my ground as I conveyed to him that he doesn't get to control me or anything I do anymore. After 2 hours of trickle-truthing and gaslighting, he left. He drove his butt straight to his mistress's house after lying to me about how he was going to have to get a hotel for the night because he had nowhere to go, and I have pictures. He was served with divorce papers a couple days after this, and they were delivered to him by the sheriff. I filed for an at-fault divorce on the grounds of adultery and abandonment, and asked him to pay my attorney's fees, since it was his fault I had to hire a lawyer. Pretty standard stuff, you know. So now I get a call from my lawyer, telling me he's contesting and wants me to pay his lawyer's fees. I'm not sure if he's contesting that he cheated or if he just doesn't want to pay for my lawyer, but either way, I'm mad. I've spent years supporting this jerk and have gone broke doing so. And he thinks he's entitled to have me pay for this whole thing on top of that. For what it's worth, I have tons of proof of his affair, text pictures, etc., and I also have proof of financial infidelity as well. I'm not sure what he thinks he's going to accomplish, but I just can't see a judge siding with him. His lawyer tried to get us to settle instead of getting his client dragged into court with all the people I would have come and testify about their affairs with him. And he knew his girlfriend or girlfriends would get dragged through the mud as well. He refused to pay my fees, claimed he was broke, but he has a job now, plus he has a source of income that he never even told me about. So we did not agree to settle. Update number 2. Robert never showed up to the divorce hearing, so everything was done without him. Most courts have some version of court call, but he didn't make a call as well. Anyways, I'm happily unmarried now. I also got full custody of our daughter. Oh, and the court ordered him to pay alimony for the half time we were actively married. I did not expect that. Before the divorce, when he knew he's going to get screwed at court, he showed up at my doorstep, but I slammed it in his face this time. He knocked until I threatened to call the police. He left after that, but showed up the next day, and the next, and the next. Finally, for my daughter's sake, I let him in. He insisted that he wanted to talk, and I decided to have one last talk with him and set my boundaries. We met in a public place, and the talk was long and hard. I wanted him to be honest, and I told him the moment I caught a lie, I was leaving. He explained that after his father died, his family basically blamed him for it. I thought he would talk about the inheritance, but he kept insisting on giving him another chance. That we can love each other again and that we could be together. He got COVID and it hit really hard, to the point that he believed he would die and realized how alone he really was, how stupid he was, and the mistake he made so long ago. After all that, he said he regretted everything he did and said, and now he was ready to be family that we always meant to be. He never even mentioned our daughter at any moment at all, and only after I pointed it out he started to ask about her. I asked if he was really sorry, or are we just a last option? Did he really love us, or are we just consolation prizes? Did he come back for love, or because he has an ulterior motive? He was unable to answer any of it, and he only said things like, "It's not like that. Susan, you need to understand, I'm not like that." When I tried to settle that we were over, he grabbed my hand forcefully, and I told him to let go, that we were over. Neither I nor my daughter wanted anything to do with him, so please, leave us alone. We are living a good life without him. He then went mad, saying I could not leave him, that it wasn't my choice, and that he doesn't have anything else, that I can't take away his daughter. I still don't know why, but the last sentence absolutely triggered me. The next are my exact words, but well, what I said, here we go. Your daughter? Your daughter? You're not her father. You only gave your sperm to her. You're not a real father. Tell me, where were you when she was sick? Where were you when she had a fever? When she was scared at night? When did her first teeth fall? When she cried on the nights because she missed her dad? Where were you on her first day of school? Will you be there when she, has her first period? When she has her first boyfriend? When does her heart break for the second time because the first one who broke her heart was her own father? Which women were you with when she needed a dad? You have no right to claim you're her father because you never acted like a father, ever. He tried to reply, but I saw how he was unable with his words. Update number 3. I just want to say thank you everyone for the advice I needed. Renovation work on the house is going now that the divorce is granted. Changed all the locks and installed security cameras. I have a mortgage, free home, and this is an incredible boost to my financial situation. However, Robert decided to contest the will. My attorney has not advised anything specific yet. He's been civil lawyer before, so I can count on him. I expect to hear from him again within 2 weeks, as that's how long we have to agree on a mediator. And also, they're putting together a discovery request, so I expect to hear from him on that soon as well. My lawyer warned that through a mediator, they will try to break me down so that he gets something, but I won't let that happen. The mediator is necessary because the quote manipulation, accusation can be translated into a suit to invalidate my father-in-law's will for undue influence. People leaving valuable assets to the primary caregiver who would not otherwise inherit them can raise some red flags with the court system, who don't know the detailed situation. So, they have a decent chance of overturning the will. Robert has also informed my family that he wants to get back together, and they'd started putting pressure on me to accept. My parents and siblings have texted me saying they know how much he loves me, how he regretted ever hurting me, and how Laura deserved the chance to have a proper family. But I just ignored these texts, obviously. Update number 4. Final update. Wow. Sorry everyone for not updating for a very long time. I'm going to try to keep this short. During the mediation, Robert's lawyer played on my emotions and tried to get me to think about the times, other than he was cheating on me and abandoning his entire family. I did not let him play that game and held fast and stayed strong. The mediation failed because what we wanted changed the more we talked, and just not agreeing to not talk to each other was not enough for him. It seemed to be going in circles. We went to trial where his lawyer surprisingly did not argue at all. He was radio silent. So, Robert himself tried an even dirtier trick, including accusing my father-in-law of being on drugs, which he wasn't. He proceeds to argue that he was not together with me, so the will's not valid, to which he got stupidly agreed, leaving me and my daughter. Luckily, the will had a no contest clause. The judge had some choice words as well, as he was wasting the court's time by making bad faith arguments. Robert lost the contest. Only in the evening did my lawyer let me know that Robert's been lying to his attorney. Once all the truth and proof came to light, his attorney quit and told him to go play with himself. Robert came to me with all the rage in the world. He did not let me speak, but it looked like he was really frustrated and raging mad. I got upset and basically told him he did not have the right to be frustrated with me for his own wrongs. Turns out I disrupted his plan to get revenge on me for causing him to be a serial cheater. He did finally shut up after I gave him the handwritten letter from his dad that said he won't get an inch his entire miserable life. Recently, I was looking around the house for some cards that I've given to my father-in-law for special occasions, and I could not find them anywhere. I looked through a drawer where he keeps random papers of his writing and drawings and found an old letter. I didn't read the entire thing, but the first sentence started with, "You've been dead to me for 10 years now, because that's how long it's been since you last recognized me." Since then, Robert contacted me. I do feel fortunate that my daughter was too young to remember my divorce and all the bitter things that came with it. I'm hoping to give her the best in the world with the help of her lovely grandfather's inheritance. Okay, I'm not gonna lie to you guys. The comment section was absolutely ripping Robert to shreds. I'm not even going to go into the comments because they are just explicit comments about how Robert should not even exist on this planet, how he's just a piece of crap, and it goes on and on. So let's just talk about this. If you were in OP's position and, well, you were looking after your sickly father-in-law, and you come to find out all the inheritance is going to you, how would you react? Would you react the same way that OP did? It was definitely a tough subject for her, but I think she handled it like a champion, like a warrior. And she ends up winning the court case, so it looks like the judge thought the same thing. Guys, go ahead and drop your opinions down below. Let's discuss this one. Unfortunately, my mother passed away. I was supposed to get the inheritance from her. However, my stepfather, he's coming up with all these bogus claims saying, oh no, the money's going to him and he's going to look after it. Well, little did I know, he was planning a gigantic wedding at one of the most expensive venues in the entire city for his daughter, and guess whose money he was going to use to pay for it? That's right, mine! I lived in a small, picturesque town, along with my family. I had a meager, paying job that was enough for me to get by, although my mother was affluent. She lived close by in a 3-story building alone with my stepdad, Max, and my stepsister, Chloe. My mother had married Max after my dad died when I was 2, and they had Chloe. From time to time, my mother would help me out with money whenever needed. I was happy, going on about my daily life up until a tragic event, the death of my mother. Not only did it wreck my happiness, but also wrecked me financially, as my mom was the pillow I could fall back on for anything. She was my pillar of support against my stepfather. He never liked me that much. Come to think of it, he never really liked or got along with anyone. I would come to know why now. Ever since my mom passed away a few days ago, I've been feeling all kinds of emotions. It's like I'm lost and struggling to cope with everything. Every day is a challenge, as sadness keeps overwhelming me, but I refuse to give up. I'm holding on to memories I have of my mom, both the happy ones and the ones that bring tears. Those memories give me strength and remind me of her love. But my mom loved and cared enough for me to leave a large amount of inheritance for me in her will. Her will was no secret amongst our family. After having such an enormous amount of money to her name, she was bound to make a will to safeguard her money should anything happen to her. She had hired a lawyer named Peter, who worked tirelessly with her on making this will ironclad. I would receive a sizable amount from the inheritance, enough to suffice me for years on. I had my job, too, on top of it. I would lead a quiet and peaceful life. But that did not seem the case, as in the days to come my stepfather found out about the inheritance I would be receiving. He had none to his name. My stepsister had the same amount as me to her name, but none for stepfather. After Max, my stepdad, got to know about this, he had a cunning plan set in motion. He invited me to tea one day. I was also to collect the inheritance papers that had been kept in my mom's safe, and so I went. There was an air of seriousness and envy around him when I arrived. I greeted them both with a smile on my face. This would be the first time I would be seeing them after my mom's funeral. I had barely had the chance to have a word with them then. Now seemed the perfect time to get word in about the inheritance papers. Chloe went upstairs and was left alone with Max. Max seemed sad and sat upright. He said he's really sorry about it, but I cannot have the inheritance papers. My blood ran cold. He continued saying that the will's quite vague and there's no mention as to whether I should get the inheritance or whether Chloe should get it. Well, I sat there dumbfounded. I asked him to prove it then. Show me the will papers, and he said he cannot do that as the papers are kept in a private safe at the bank, and him being my mom's husband was the only one who could access it now. He threw in a few statements about me doubting his words. I had no other option but to leave. So, I got home and laid in bed for a few hours, thinking about what was going to happen to me now and how was I going to sustain myself. Without that inheritance, I would barely be able to make ends meet and would probably have to get a second job. Eventually, I broke down into tears as I was confused about all that's happened. I'd lost my mom, my inheritance, I'd lost about everything. A few days passed by and I was trying to go on with my life, working 2 jobs, trying to make ends meet and sustain myself, when I got an invitation for my stepsister's wedding. She was getting married in about 2 months. Not a lot of surprise there. She'd been dating her boyfriend for about 3 years now, and what came as a shock was that her wedding was going to happen in a very big venue. It was going to be a huge party, with lots of people attending. Family members and friends from both sides of the family. I was suspicious about it as I knew my stepdad barely had anything to be able to afford his wedding, and the stepsister's inheritance was not enough to cover the whole cost. I suspected it had something to do with my part as well, and so I dropped by to see them both and discuss it. The house was buzzing with activities and wedding preparations. I also witnessed a change in my stepdad and stepsister. It seemed as they had forgotten all about my mom and was now enjoying the money that my mom left them. Max greeted me with what seemed like a plastic smile on his face. It also looked like he knew what I had come for, and so he said it before I could even say a word. He was using the inheritance money my mom had left me to throw Chloe a grand wedding. He said she deserves it after all that's happened. What's with, Emily passing away and the grief that they've been through. Chloe played along and said she was indeed happy that the bad times were over and that their future now no longer looked bleak. I didn't know what to say, so I gave up and left. That night, as I lay in bed, I went over all that happened in my mind. I was robbed of my inheritance, and here I was, working 2 jobs to sustain myself, while my stepfather was out there throwing Chloe some sort of grand wedding with my inheritance money. I was suspicious of his words about the unclear terms in my mom's will, and I knew something was up. It felt like Max had concocted this whole plan on how to snatch up my inheritance and use it for his own means. I knew I had to do something about it. I knew I did. I had to get my inheritance back somehow and began planning. I would have to get in touch with my mom's lawyer, Peter, and discuss with him about the will. I also knew something was up about my stepdad, and so decided to speak to a few family members or family friends who had cut us off because of him. I met up with James, a family friend who cut us off for a reason I would not get to know. Well, until now. James and I met for coffee at a local cafe and started recounting the details of what happened. Max was in need of urgent money for paying Chloe's school fees. James, however, knew Emily had more than enough to take care of it, but Max had come up with an excuse for that too. They had run out of their savings and Emily would be paid in just a few weeks, and so they had no means to pay for the fees and Chloe would have to stop going to school. Well, James took a bit of pity on Chloe and gave a few $1,000s cash up front. Cold, hard cash. Max was thankful and said he would return it all when Emily got her salary later. But he did the unthinkable. He disappeared with the money and blocked James. James got to know from friends that Max had spent all the money gambling instead, and the story about Chloe's school fees was made up, as Emily had already paid it. James figured he was not going to get back his money and just cut Emily and Max off. He had made a mistake because of which he had been in debt for months, but he learned his lesson. I thanked James for telling me this information and told him about how Max had taken my inheritance and was now throwing Chloe some grand wedding like Cinderella. James, too, felt angry about it, as I did, and said he would help in any way he can. He also told me to talk to Simon, another such friend of whom I was unaware was estranged by my stepdad's actions. I met up with Simon not long after, and he too told me about how Max had also deceived him under the pretense of he needed money for a very urgent matter. Simon, being a good friend of Emily's, gave it up in hopes that he would get it back, only to find out later that he's been blocked and his money being used for leisure activities. Of Max, of course. Simon, too, decides to cut Emily and Max off at this point, and has not spoken to them ever since. I told him about my inheritance and how Max had snatched it from me. So he spoke in my support. He probed me to talk to Peter and said Peter was a great lawyer, and together with his support I would be able to get my money back. He also said he would chip in to support me when needed. I thanked him and said I would indeed keep in touch with him and James, those two being the only people I could honestly trust now. So I decided it was finally time to meet the infamous lawyer who helped me create my mom's will. He would know explicit details about it, which would be crucial for me getting back my inheritance. I called Peter over to discuss everything with him. Peter had come over to my house after his work and we sat down as he spoke about Emily. Not only was he a lawyer, he had become her close friend. He had helped her manage her account and finances and often advised her on non-trivial matters as well. Peter and Emily would have long afternoon talks during tea. Peter seemed like a good lawyer and a good person too. I told Peter about my inheritance and Peter confirmed I should be able to get it without any issue. I then told him about how Max told me about the uncertain terms of the will and how I would not be able to claim the inheritance and instead Max would claim it, and how Max is using that inheritance money to pay for the grand wedding for Chloe. I told him about how I was working 2 jobs to sustain myself and how I wanted to find a way to rightfully claim my inheritance back from my cunning stepfather. Peter listened intently to my words and said he needed to take a look at the will to advise me further. We would go on from there. It was left to me to obtain the papers of the will. This time, however, I was smart and contacted the bank myself. They told me, as her offspring, I could access the will's paper kept in the safe. I thanked the bank and informed them what my stepdad had told me about him being the only person who can access the will papers. They told me that either my mom's partner or her offspring or her lawyer can access them. I should have figured what Max had said about this would have been a lie. I went over to the bank and collected the papers. As I skimmed through them, I realized I indeed needed Peter's help in understanding the legal terms, which eluded me. So, we decided to meet again to discuss the terms of the will and plot a revenge against my stepdad. Peter was going over the terms carefully and finding any statement that would support me or any statements about the terms of who would get the inheritance that was mentioned in the will. I, however, am feeling skeptical about it, as I am but a simple man who just wanted his inheritance money that his mother had left him. All the plotting and planning had made me feel like a bad person for doing what I am about to do to my stepfather. Should I just let it go, or should I fight to get my inheritance back? My mom had saved up all her hard-earned money and had willed it to me. It was wrong the way how my stepdad usurped it, and here I am asking all you guys this. Am I the a-hole for getting revenge on my stepdad who cut me off from my late mom's inheritance, claiming my stepsister needed the money for her grand wedding? What's up, everybody? Mr. Reddito here. Today's story is that of a drama. Can you believe this guy's trying to take all of OP's inheritance for a wedding? Well, I do have 2 updates for you guys. If you're new to the channel, go ahead and click that subscribe button for daily videos, and let's go ahead and jump into update number 1. An update for you guys. Peter filed a case in a nearby court and had fought fiercely. Max, however, seemed smug and was somehow getting away with it all, saying that the terms in the will were not clear. Peter and I would have to come up with something to prove his statement wrong. Within the next few days, Peter approached me with some information about my mother's will. He told me that Emily did not truly trust Max, and she had an inkling that Max was not a good person as he had made himself out to be. He also added that Max did not have a good relationship with anyone other than Emily. I know James and Simon could corroborate this. Peter said that Emily often told him about how she felt Max was with her just for the money, and so she decided to make that will. Peter was excited about what he had said next. He said he found a secret clause that my mother had added in the will just for me. The clause explicitly stated that should anything suspicious occur, the inheritance would exclusively belong to me. I was overjoyed. This bit of information was a game changer. I now felt confident that I could get my inheritance, which I deserve, back from Max, who was going to spend it all on a wedding which my mom would never have liked. This revelation not only strengthened my resolve, but would also equip me with all the support I needed to combat my stepdad's, machinations. But before that, we needed proper proof and evidence to submit in court, and prove that there were suspicious activities with my mother's will and the rightful heir to the inheritance was not able to claim it. Together with Peter, I would have to come up with a proper plan on how I can get my revenge against Max. So, we started gathering witnesses and evidences that was required. After we had gathered all evidence, a date for a hearing was set. and the court case was held. It was not an easy day for Max and Chloe. Peter, the lawyer, representing me, and Max had gotten a lawyer to represent himself and Chloe. The hearing ahead of us was long and tough on both of us. Max sat there listening to all that was said against him. The truth had finally come out, and it was destroying him. I also witnessed a sad look on Chloe's face. I would apologize to her later. She had been caught up in the middle of all of it. It made me sad to do what I was doing, to be honest, but I needed to set things right. In the back of my mind, I had a feeling that what I was doing was wrong. I feel like if I do this, I might lose people I knew my whole life. The inheritance money would ensure that I had a good future, but it might as well end up destroying Max and Chloe's lives. Max and Chloe's relatives, who had also become my family when Mom married Max, would come to hate me for uprooting their lives. I feel troubled by those thoughts, knowing what I'm about to do may as well cause me to lose the only family I have right now. It would make me rich, but Chloe would also suffer because of this rift between Max and I. Our first witness was James, an old estranged family friend. He would give his statement about how Max had manipulated and lied into giving him the money. He would also add how he had been pushed into debt by my stepfather's actions. James' testimony is useful in helping build a case as to how my stepfather was not a person to be trusted. Our second witness was Simon, who, like James, had also lost money to stepfather's actions, and he too suffered from it. His testimony would help build a case where it showed a pattern of distrust and manipulation against my stepfather. I would also add my testimony, where I was juggling 2 jobs after my inheritance got snatched away from me. I would also tell all the details and report my stepfather's exact words about there being uncertain terms of the will, so he would claim it for now. I would also add how I learned from the bank about him lying about who could access the will papers. Peter also would testify against my stepfather by telling what Emily had told him about how she does not really trust Max. He would then bring up the secret clause of the will and conclude how my stepfather had manipulated me into believing his words and had taken over my inheritance. The secret clause would then be exercised in the situation, and I would get my inheritance back as I was rightfully owned. I also had gathered evidence from the clubs that Max went to, where he would just gamble and lose all of James and Simon's money. I also had ample evidence from several salons, showrooms, malls that he went to and spent huge amounts of money. The evidence and testimonies against him were ironclad as the secret clause in the will. Peter and I had finally looked in bank accounts of my stepdad, hoping to find some significant information there that could help our case. That's when I realized that my stepdad had been stealing a small sum of money from my mother for a long time. The nerve of him. After the final evidence of the secret clause was presented, the judge put the court in recess to think of and come to a decision. Meanwhile, Max and Chloe walked up to have a word with me. Chloe went first and asked why I was doing this, and why I was hell-bent on ruining her wedding. Well, Max kept a stern face and looked away, anger boiling up inside of him, I could tell. He told me I would come to regret doing this and claiming back my inheritance. I apologized to Chloe that she has to go through this, and I assured her that her part of the inheritance would remain hers, and I was just rightfully taking back what's mine. Update number 2. Recess is over. The judge made a decision. He ruled in my favor and said that, as mentioned in the secret clause of the will, the inheritance would go to me due to the suspicious activity conducted by stepfather. The judge went on to further reprimand my stepdad for his manipulation and lying tactics concerning the money that he acquired so far. The nightmare was finally over for me. I got back my inheritance. My mother's hard-earned money was now rightfully mine. I had yet to decide what to do with it, as first I had important matters to tend to, such as what I should do with my stepdad now. Blocking him everywhere seemed like the right choice, but what about Chloe? I decided to meet with Chloe and talk to her about it. I would even get a chance to tell her my side of the things. I would also offer her some of the money if she needed for the wedding. After all, she was the innocent one in all this. Chloe understood and supported my decision in claiming my inheritance back. However, she was still upset about her dad. I'd cut off all contact with him and his side of the family. They were pissed at me for taking back my money and were mad I'd won the case and left my stepfather with nothing. The court case actually became quite famous amongst the small population of this city. People that knew him. The businesses often turned a blind eye whenever he walked in. My stepdad's family had come to hate me for what I did to him and lied to people about the true details of the case, in order to bring people on their side. However, that did not quite work as planned, as they only got a handful of people to believe in their made-up stories. Things ended for the best, and I still keep in touch with Chloe from time to time. The last I heard of my stepfather was about him struggling to find a proper paying job. It seemed karma had found its way.
Wow, Max was probably one of the most evil characters we've seen this week. I mean, taking away OP's inheritance and forcing a court battle. Oh my goodness. I did feel bad for Chloe though. Maybe she did not stand up enough for OP, but at the same time, she was caught in the middle of the feud between OP and her own father. So it was a sticky situation to be in for Chloe, so I don't blame her at all. Let me know your thoughts though. Maybe you feel differently. Drop your comments down below. Let's discuss this one, because this one had a lot to take in.
Entitled Sister Alert, one of the biggest entitled sisters of the decade. Guys, when I tell you my sister absolutely was the golden egg child, everything went her way. I'm talking clothes, cars, first boyfriend, she had it all. But when it came to me and Grandpa, we shared this bond that nobody could break, not even her. Well, one day, Grandfather got ill, and things started to take a big turn for the worse, and I'm not talking about the health of Grandpa, I'm talking about me and my sister. I'm mourning. Sorry if I don't introduce myself well. It's just that when you lose someone important in your life, maybe the most important person in it, a lot of things seem to stop making sense. I'll tell you a little more about myself. I've lived with my parents all my life. My parents and my older sister Emma, whom I like to call the devil. I say that because she's just is older. Has lived her whole life believing she's the best being in the world, and that she must be number one in everything. When we were little, she got the best science project in school at the time, and I did it as well during my year, but guess which of the two projects is still sitting on the fridge to brag about? I've always come in second place. And I'm thankful that at least I don't have a younger sister, because I can't imagine being the middle child, neglected, unnoticed. Although my experience is no better. Emma was always given new, pretty clothing, according to what she wanted, but me, well, I was given her leftover clothing when she started to outgrow them. I had to mold myself to her style all my life, even though I did not like such bright clothing. Even when my breast started to grow a few sizes bigger than Emma's, I was forced to wear her bras. So I spent much of my adolescence with chest pain. My parents praised and spoiled her too much. They exposed her to the world as their best creation, and me. They even confused my name with hers, calling me Emma from time to time. Something that has transcended through the family. They don't know how awkward it is to have your relatives get your name wrong, and then pretend it didn't even happen. Well, everyone in the family was like that, except one, my grandfather. Grandpa was an angel, the kindest and most tender person I've ever met. He's one of the few people who truly loved me in my life, for as long as I can remember. Every time we visit him, that is, several times in my childhood since he lived relatively close by, he would get excited and welcome us both with a hug. Do you want to know why I liked him so much? Because he didn't let himself be manipulated by Emma. And I knew that long before I could even read. When we were little girls, I estimated I was about 4 or 5 years old. He welcomed us into his home and bent down to hug us. While Emma was quick and hugged him first, she wanted to stay glued to him to shower him with kisses and make conversation, so he would not say hello to me. And my grandfather, best of the best, said, "Give me a second, honey. I have to say hello to your little sister, too." And not only did he hug me, he took me in his arms and lifted me in the air, almost touching the ceiling and filling me with laughter. That's one of the most fondest memories, because Emma ended up crying that day, saying she did not want to play with Grandpa. It was one of those times when I could be the center of attention. I understood he would not let himself be manipulated by third parties to stop loving his little granddaughter. And so, it was like that for the rest of our lives. Whenever we visited him, he was thrilled to see me, and we would talk for hours at a time. I remember that on one occasion I fought with my mother and decided to leave the house, going to Grandpa's, who not only welcomed me with open doors, but also talked to my mother, advocating for me and making her understand that she was the one who was in bad shape. From that moment on, I knew that this man was my refugee, my best friend, and my greatest ally. Of course, I had my friends in and out of class, but whenever something happened, I always went to Grandpa, because he was all ears for whatever I had to tell him. He always greeted me with hot cocoa with marshmallows, putting a little more in it than Emma's cup. She resented visiting him for not being the center of attention all the time, and I felt bad because Grandpa treated her just well. Maybe not as well as me, but enough to express affection for her. And so, it went for 28 long years until everything began to fall apart when Grandpa became ill. It was very brief, and where cancer began to burn a hole near his shoulder, consuming almost all of his energy, and I visit him from time to time. Ironically, I was one of the least likely to visit him in the family, as I didn't have the stomach to bear seeing him in that condition. Everybody would tell me to go visit him, but even he would tell me, "Don't worry, baby. You go on with your things. I'll be fine for tomorrow." Teardrops came by just remembering him. Well, he passed away on a Friday, right after my workday, and we went to the hospital in tears. Emma was there already, and she was one of the few who was able to talk to him in his last moments. That made me a little upset at first, but now a week later, well, I don't seem to mind as much. My grandfather was a good man, and a better person than his granddaughter. He always supported me in everything more than my parents, and we're close to a will reading scheduled for tomorrow. I plan to start a nice project in his honor, but first I have to do a lot of research on the subject. Besides waiting for tomorrow's news, and my grandfather was a pretty thrifty person, so as bad as it sounds to say, I may get a generous inheritance for myself. Although I would not mind sharing it with Emma, I really would not mind anything at this point. I'd give anything, all my savings or dreams, just to be able to have another afternoon of hot chocolate with my old man. I still miss you, Grandpa. Update number 1. There are many injustices in this world, but I doubt very much of that you readers will ever go through one as huge as mine. I've just arrived at the distribution of my grandfather's estate, and I feel that the man I knew for a lifetime was a complete stranger. Do you know what happened? According to his will, he left equal shares of a small but not very modest fortune he had to his 2 granddaughters. Actually, the assets were passed on to be sold and the money given to us. And while it started as something equitable, half to Emma and half to me, my parents insisted to give most of it to Emma, around 90%. She's been talking about some new business venture that'll increase our earnings. I don't know much about it, but it's beyond unfair that I'm forced to give away almost my entire part of inheritance. It's basically a violation of Grandpa's last will, for goodness sake. At first it seemed illogical, but Emma explained that during Grandpa's last days, she told him about that new business that she had in mind that would guarantee to double her investment in just a few days. And by the end of the year, well, could well be considered the seven-figure sum. Weird thing, he agreed. As she said this, my parents got excited and their eyes sparkled with such a juicy idea. But I thought something was wrong. I mean, those kinds of things are very delicate changes, which I don't think I can be made at the last minute. The lawyer told us that if there was at least one eyewitness who could corroborate Emma's words, they can take it into consideration. Passing over my head. The worst part is that there was a witness, a nurse. A girl named Sora was in charge of taking care of my grandfather during this whole process. They developed a beautiful friendship together with Emma, and that's something that hurts me too much, for not having been part of it. I was too sad to go and visit him, and at this point I cannot be blamed. Anyways, this girl Sora claimed that my grandfather said that so Emma could have almost 90% of the investment. His words were, according to her, "After talking to my eldest granddaughter, I can assure you that she has a solid job and that in the long run, it can pay off for the whole family. If possible, tell my lawyer to modify the will so that everything goes to her, and then give the other granddaughter a fair amount, commensurating with love I have for her." Excuse me? The other granddaughter? And what kind of phrase is, "the amount corresponding to the love I have for her"? You'll excuse me, but that sounds like anyone but my grandpa. He would never say anything so complicated or lacking in sentiment. Still, I rely on the fact that there's no changes allowed to the will post-mortem just because of a few words. And that's when things got complicated. You see, my parents, those two people who were supposed to look after me, talked to Emma and discussed the possibility of filing a lawsuit against me in order to give the majority of the money to her. In a few days, there will be a division of assets, and I decided to talk to my parents one last time. However, I did not count on the fact that they were the most manipulable people in the world, and had fallen for my sister's trickery. My dad said, "You have to understand that Grandpa talked to Emma and he was very good at business. If anyone knew how to turn $1 into 10 in less than 2 days, it was him. And if he had faith in her project, you'd have to trust him more." Instead, my mother, well, she was a little more explicit and less kind and said, "Daughter, I know you have a good relationship with Grandpa, but this kind of thing is delicate. And I'm very sorry to say it, but none of this would have happened if you had visited my father more in his more delicate state." Well, you may have well turned things around, but I hope this serves as a life lesson. Nevertheless, your sister looks like she knows what she's doing, and having Grandpa's blessing, we're guaranteed success. Ultimately, I could not convince my parents, and at this point, I began to feel hatred and loathing for them. The worst part is that I had lost the most important person in my life, and I no longer had support to get me through. It's like I was truly alone in the world. I had not spoken to Emma or the nurse since, although I tried to at the time. I asked her why she was doing this, and she pretended to be oblivious. She only commented the same as my parents, that if it bothered me so much, at least I could have the delicacy to be with him in his last moments, but who can blame me for avoiding that pain? They're basically telling me that I should have suffered to move forward with the project. Well, if that's the case, I'm sorry, but I'd rather be out $1 than have to see the old man suffer. Update number 2, 2 weeks later. Hey guys, so it's been 2 weeks. Since, well, the division of the assets, and Emma's already done her thing. She started a venture that has my parents and the rest of the family in love, although I don't quite understand it. In fact, to this day, I don't quite know what it's all about. It's something about benefits and co-ops, something I've never been a big fan of. He used all of Grandpa's money almost immediately, and I was only left with a small portion that he gave me enough just to upgrade my phone. For a few months now, I've been waiting for a raise at work so I can upgrade my 5-year-old phone. In that sense, well, I can thank my grandfather in a roundabout way. Meanwhile, I have to watch my sister start a new life full of opportunities. I wish I could feel angry, but my posthumous funding is pretty dependent on how financially successful she might become, so I have to wish her the best in the world, even if it's the bitterest pill to swallow. To top it off, next to her is Sora, the nurse, who joined the whole business because, well, although she did not have any part of it, the good friends she made with my grandfather gave her, apparently, enough power to be part of my sister's project. I've been feeling a little down because of how quiet it's been lately, as I no longer have a way to visit Grandpa. The other day, I passed by the cemetery, and it made me very sad to see Grandpa's tombstone. I feel that at some point I have to go visit him, even if it's only metaphorically. For the time being, I decided to repair a little bit of the damage I feel I did not by just visiting him at the time. Maybe it doesn't seem like it, but because of the bad treatment I've been given by the family regarding that, I feel there are some things I haven't been able to make amends about. That is why I will go and pick up his things from the house where he used to live. That would be my goodbye to him. Like closing a cycle, and so I can say goodbye to the one who gave me the best of my life. Gosh, I feel so bad that I couldn't be with him. I even feel that his final thought of giving Emma a chance at the money was not so far-fetched, as she was the one who showed true fidelity. Still, I would like to go through his final resting place and learn more from him, because now that I think about it, I'm coming to a very bitter reflection, and this is what I hardly learned from him in life. He was always attentive to me in my affairs, and never expected the same courtesy in return. What if he felt pity for me? That would break my soul, because I really could not bear to know that for years that gentleman was under a huge burden of waiting for his little granddaughter to learn some empathy, so that she would hear about him, and that she never ended up paying him back. What's more is, she didn't have the decency to visit him when he was sick. The only thing I knew about him was that he had been in the military for much of his youth, but left to devote himself to the priesthood. But after that, nothing. Maybe I ended up being the real villain in the story, but not by much, as I'll go to fix as much as I can. Update number 3. Before I reveal something big that I discovered, I went to my grandfather's house where there were still some items that would not be sold, which I was to take to another of my family's house in the country. There was all kinds of things there, from collectible baseball cards, black and white photos of great-grandmother. I was looking for anything salvageable, leaving behind a sock without a pair, full of holes and frayed, and put it in the truck. I was accompanied by my friend Lisa, who asked me, "This is thrown away?" And she told me about some papers that were kept in one of the hundreds of drawers in the bedroom. The papers were numbered and appeared to have been written by hand. The first page read, "To Amanda and my beloved granddaughter." Those were his memoirs. My grandfather had written his memoirs, and he had dedicated them to my grandmother and me. Or, well, I assume it was to me because he singled out the granddaughter. But that was not what surprised me. Not about this whole situation, it was what I read in the last few pages. Let's see. I won't go into the whole story of my grandfather. I can't either, because there are times when I don't understand his handwriting well. Maybe because of his arthritis and because it's a bit private. I don't know if he intended to publish it, and I need to talk to my parents about it, just to summarize. In the story, he talks lightly about his childhood, which is heartbreaking as he says that, at the point in his life, he doesn't remember much about it. His lovers and my mother's upbringing, it got interesting when she started talking about me, saying this and that about her granddaughter, and he never mentions my name, but it's clearly me, describing many of the passages we've experienced throughout our history together. However, things change when she gets to the last few pages. You see, where he starts to reflect on the purpose of the book and the final dedication, perhaps knowing what was about to happen to him. I gather that he did this precisely even when his illness began a few months ago. It went something like this. Lisa helped me transcribe it, and I quote, "I notice how the time of my end is near. It feels surreal, the whole experience. You don't hear anyone say, hey, you're gonna die on such and such day at such and such hour very often. But, hey, it's my turn, like so many others before me, and what was left for me to do? I guess nothing. I can't even be in the position of being remorseful or making amends for my mistakes because I know I didn't make them. And everything bad I did I already worked out long ago. I also have the goodness to walk away with clean hands and clear conscience, mind you. And not only that, but I'll be able to leave through the wide door knowing that I helped my best legacy, my little one." Clarification. Throughout the text he mentions his granddaughter. That is me as his little one. So the reference to me was clear, and I quote you, "Giving her the little big push that she needs. She hasn't visited me in a long time. Almost since I fell into bed, but not only can't I not blame her, I applaud her decision. I don't want a young girl to have to watch her elderly dying grandfather waiting for the final ring-a-ding. At least I know that with this she'll understand that I respect her decision and wish her well. But first, I share with you, my friends here listening, my plan. I've amassed a small fortune that I plan to direct to my granddaughter so that I can lighten the burden of her day-to-day life. I was going to divide it equally between her and her sister, but my decision was radically changed by several factors. One of them is that her sister, who has been visiting me much, well, overmuch, just to gain some sort of favoritism, which she'll get in reverse. She has insisted that the money I allocate for both of them be almost exclusively for her, and it's the biggest sign that she does not deserve it. Between you and me, that girl has had a lifelong knack for manipulation worthy of an 80s con artist. My daughter fell for the game, and so did her husband. I will not encourage this kind of behavior, so she... blah, blah, blah. Grandpa was explaining that Emma did not deserve the money, and when I saw the date of the last update, it was only a couple days before his departure from this world. So it doesn't match Emma or Sora's statements, which said that grandfather had left her the inheritance a week before. Well, this writing was proof enough that Emma had indeed lied. And even if she had alleged a witness, which is something that should be investigated as well, her word would be worthless against an official statement of the deceased. On Lisa's recommendation, I took a picture of every single page. My phone's bursting at the seams because there were almost 200 pages, but it's better to make sure before something else happens. The next thing is to seek assistance from the lawyers so they can help us gather more information so I can get what I deserve. I know this situation feels horrible, as it is putting me against my sister for basically money, but I see it more in a sense of not tarnishing my grandfather's last will, and doing him justice where justice is due. Update number 4. Have you ever had that feeling? Guys, have you ever had that feeling that there's no way this could ever happen to you? Well, I have. And I feel that I caused a greater evil to my family by seeking justice. I was researching my grandfather's case where the inheritance he was to leave would be divided equally, but then taking most of it to me at the risk of angering my sister Emma, which it did. But with the help of my grandfather's direct text messages, the lawyers and I were able to have enough basis to formally ask Emma for an explanation. She dodged the issues and all at once played the victim, claiming more that it was a family matter, rather than saying that she was true. She kept harping on the nurse issue, but the letters I showed pointed to the contrary. My parents, strangely enough, sided with Emma, knowing that I had the upper hand, and my mother was even able to confirm my grandfather's handwriting on the text, as if to corroborate that it was legitimate. It escalated to the one point where Emma decided to sue for defamation. When I saw the notice, oh boy, I was shocked, as she was now actively fighting for the money. That's when I decided to let the war begin. But it's worse for her, as after a few sessions, the jury decided to appeal in my favor, and not only that, but they agreed with my counterclaim, and that's right, I decided to countersue her for certain rather capital things. Turns out that, as a part of my grandfather's investigation, my lawyer told me to look for whereabouts of the money Emma's used, in case she had to replace it, so Lisa and I set about it. It turns out that, well, Emmy, the money she used was only to fund some sort of Ponzi schemes, in which she was including more and more people. When I found out, I was upset. I did not hesitate to tell my parents, who indirectly had been part of the scheme, in which Emma had told them to participate, making them believe that they would triple their income by the end of the year. She had the evidence of not only that, but some witnesses, as she had already started the seasons of deceptions coming to light, with several people claiming not to see results in Emma's promises. Ponzi schemes are quite delicate, so move one card and the whole house collapses. I used this to my advantage in meetings. Where the judges heard about this, he was outraged as well, both for misusing my grandfather's illegitimate money and for being part of a Ponzi scheme years before. Well, I later learned. What a happy coincidence. This upset the whole family, as Emma was filing criminal charges for class fraud. I'd say the craziest part of the matter is that she was sure that everything was legitimate, and that my grandfather has indeed said, for the alteration of the will relying on the testimony of the nurse. Here's the truth, though. Sora is very passive in front of the whole situation, moving just when Emma tells her. This worries me a little, if I'm honest, because I feel that something strange is going on between the two of them. And to top it all off, the family is even more divided, so much so that even my great-uncles and aunts, whom I haven't seen in years, are on my side. Unlike my parents, who take very dim views of this countersuit against sister, even though she's the one who started the whole thing. I even sound like those old sibling fights with the quote, "she started it," "no, she started it" thing. This has escalated to the point where a friend of mine told me that it could be in the newspapers, which I would not want, as it would be publicly humiliating my sister. Update number 5. This is the final update posted by OP. Hey guys, here's an update. I mean, the conclusion of the story is quite satisfactory, or at least I think so, because it was taken to an extreme that almost broke the family. In the end, Emma was brought to justice because of her deception. It fell apart thanks to the person who helped her from the beginning, Sora. The nurse was interviewed to exhaustion by the hospital management, who had to apply some psychological tricks to break the girl, because within days she was confessing to what we all suspected. Oh, Emma. Emma visited grandfather, it's true, and on a few occasions I saw them together calmly, without discussing something about money. I know, I shouldn't say that sort of thing, as they were family situations, but the sight of the poor gentleman being harassed by Emma, well, that's just too much to bear. However, when the practice of arguing was transcending, Emma began to talk to me about a new project she was considering creating, a venture of sorts, that I was assured I could have a success in the recent future. I guess it was the same stale scheme she kept promoting to others, only with me it was different. She said, and I quote you, she told me about her grandfather's situation, and in tears she explained how all her life she had been treated badly by him, even though she was the one to go see him and cared about him every day. Well, I admit that she did not talk about her sister.
But she told me that she would receive most of the inheritance, that, well, he would be willing to distribute them and share. In itself, the girl explained, oh Sora, how Emma seduced her into failing at the game, falling right into her trap, even asking her to lie in the modification of the will, something that could be considered illegal. Sora felt bad from the first moment and thought that was the profits from the new business. She'd get over it, but it was quite the opposite because she started with remorseful events. According to her, it was eating her up for days. When she confessed and told this to Emma, things did not go well. Emma got angry, very angry, insulting Sora and telling her that she would rot in prison for having betrayed her. Unfortunately, as a result of the whole situation, Sora would end up paying a sentence as well. Although, it might as well have been a house arrest due to her good record inside the hospital. It was a bitter outcome for the girl, but she brought it upon herself for having fallen into my sister's games. The family's devastated, because now everybody's looking down on my parents, the ones who allowed Emma to do everything. Why do I say this story is so satisfying, though? Because the other day, see, I was talking to my aunt and uncle, and they told me they scolded my parents for all the spoiling that they gave. Well, all that spoiling for Emma throughout the years, praising me for keeping my composure and respect for my grandfather. About Emma, unfortunately, she will pay 2 years of her life locked away inside of a jail cell, being that many other people sued her for the pyramid scheme she did. Plot twist. It's time for that plot twist. She was about to leave the country once her plan was succeeded. They wanted more jail time for her, but in the end, that was a sentence, and that's it. As for me, well, I was repaid in full directly from Emma's savings, and I'm just now making a goal plan for how I can invest. The last thing I knew about her was not quite too gentle for me. She now has this resentment against me for, quote, always having Grandpa's attention. Excuse me? She's the one who had the world in the palm of her hand, and being jealous of my one happy corner is too despicable for her. I sometimes go to my grandfather's grave just to visit him. I've only done it twice so far, but it's felt quite liberating. I don't know about talking to him. I may feel strange doing it, but one way or another we communicate, and I tell him he doesn't have to worry about anything anymore. I'm talking to my aunt and uncle about whether to have Grandpa's text edited. My parents aren't part of that conversation. In fact, they no longer have a say in my family decision. I would love to hear from my mother to be included in the project, only for me to tell her that she must have thought of that when she supported Emma and her shenanigans. Great comeback. That way, we would honor his legacy and show it to the world. He always loved me, and I know he did until the last of his days, and until my time comes. Every day I will thank him for being my anchor, my support, my best friend. The fact alone that this was about a stolen inheritance, I don't think OP could possibly be the a-hole. A lot of the commenters in the original post were saying, hey, what you're doing, OP, is not wrong. You're entitled to this because your grandfather wanted you to have this. But there were also some people saying, hey, OP, you're going a bit too far exposing all this and potentially getting her thrown into prison. Well, we know how the story ended up, guys. So I ask you this one question. We're caught up between going to this side or going to this side. Which side are you jumping on? Are you with OP or are you against OP? In my opinion, I think OP deserved the inheritance because it was rightfully hers and grandfather wanted her to have it. So therefore, I say, OP, you are not the a-hole and you're justified. But do drop your opinions. Let's talk about it in the comment section. My grandmother just passed away and she left me everything. We had a deep bond and she just thought that the stuff would be better with me, not my father, not my stepmom. There's a story I'm going to walk you through because this involves my evil stepmother. She thinks that she had a plan up her sleeves to take everything from me. Wow, she's going to find out real quickly. She's dealing with someone she wishes that she's never met.
Sometimes extreme greed and impatience lead people to get themselves into some trouble. And that trouble has caused them for a bit of revenge. And I cannot help it because they chose it for themselves. Hi, my name's Adrian, I'm 26 and male, and I've lived with my dad Joseph and grandmother Martha ever since my mom passed away, when I was 15 years of age. Like every kid, I loved my mom, but unfortunately, the only thing I disliked inheriting from her was depression. Due to our family history, I was a bit lucky, since mine is hardly on the verge of moderation, so yes, it was mild. Grandma, who had a great bond with her daughter-in-law, also missed her often, but being well aware of her mental condition, she was very cautious with mine as well. She took great care of me and not let any long-term impact of trauma take a toll on my mental health. So, all thanks to my grandma, I survived the loss of my mother. In the 3 years since then, my life had been going all right until I met this woman, who was introduced to me by my dad as my other future stepmother. Her name was Julia, and my grandmother had an instant dislike for her. That also included me. She seemed friendly on the surface. Grandma objected to Dad marrying Julia, but I did not care as long as I had my grandma with me. I need no one as my mother figure. Dad could have anyone in his life as long as the person did not affect me. Well, I was wrong in assuming that because after Dad got married to her, things turned tense and bitter at home because of constant conflicts between Grandma and Julia. Not only that, she turned bitter towards me as well. To her, I'm being extra sensitive, and she often labels me as a crazy person who still has not learned to deal with his emotions even at this age. Grandma resents her for being insensitive towards my mental condition, as Julia does not consider depression a serious issue. Grandma tries to make her realize how terrible of a mother she is, or how she lacks motherhood, because it's quite evident that she never bothered to claim custody of her own kids when she got divorced 5 years ago. But Julia ends up picking fights with Grandma whenever Grandma makes a bit of sense. I've started to have anxiety issues due to her presence around me, and at times I lash out at her for misbehaving with Grandmother. I could not tolerate her being mistreated by anyone, not even my own father. Her outrageous, reckless attitude towards everyone made the environment at my home a little bit chaotic, with constant arguments and tantrums. Speaking of my dad, by the way, who was aloof about my existence and never bothered me, I sometimes retaliated with my passive-aggressive actions. Seeing my such behavior, Grandma, being extra cautious, insisted that I get myself a therapist. Though I did not need it, I did not object since, looking at her family history, I understood her concern. So, she hired a psychiatrist for me, and she found it was a mild one, as expected, but it might risk getting higher. Along with that, she just gave me antidepressants, but only for emergencies, so it was sheer luck that my grandma got me the therapy at the right time, and I was thankful that the condition, in terms of my mental health, were addressed seriously. That I passed high school with decent grades, and that made Grandma proud of me. I got admitted to college, where I met my best friend, Layla. She was a strong, bold girl with a kind heart. I started being happy whenever I was with her. She was the only person I was close to after my grandma who I could trust and rely upon. And I gradually stopped attending my therapy sessions. Grandma did not object much, considering I'm an adult and can make decisions for myself. Most of the time I was running errands, attending my classes, applying for part-time jobs and internships. I started spending less time at home. It's been another 5 years since I was excluded and never bothered except by my grandma. Even Dad turned a blind eye towards her, believing Julia was made a scapegoat by Grandma and the family. I was also given hints by Dad that I should leave, as Julia was having a hard time with my grandmother. I should think about Grandma's ill health conditions, but he fails to recognize that the credit goes to Julia. He suggested that I just go buy an apartment where we could live separately since Grandma's closer to me and I could get her treated because Dad doesn't have much time to deal with Grandma on a regular basis. But I was hell-bent that the only person who would leave this place would be Julia, and Dad had a choice. This house belongs to Grandma, and only she can decide who gets to live in it. Because, well, for the last few months, Dad has been siding with Julia every time he leaves me and Grandma alone. He seems tense and lashes out at me more often. I said to him that he could leave us anytime he wished to. As I've said, he always had a choice. He turns quiet when I speak like that. I know he was happy to leave us at any time, but I wondered what was really stopping him. Every day I questioned what could be worse than this, and one day I realized how bad things can get. When I was at work, I received a call. It was my dad calling me to the hospital because Grandma suffered cardiac arrest. Anxiety crushed me at that moment, and I rushed to her. Fear of losing the only person I considered my mother was the worst thing I could feel. It felt the same as I lost my mother almost a decade ago. Grandma took Dad's promise that he would take care of me and advised me to visit my regular therapist. She was about to say more regarding the house, but her breath, it just gave way, and she was no longer here. I was absolutely devastated and my world shattered to pieces. Update number 1. Hey guys, I do have a sad update for all you, and well, things have become unusual and I cannot figure out what I'm supposed to do. Layla had suggested that I go to a therapist, so she made me an appointment. But I skipped it since it was Grandmother's funeral. I still can't get used to the fact that she is not present in my life anymore. After Grandmother's death, I had a hard time dealing with life. Daily, menial tasks felt like a burden, and I've lost my job as well. Layla constantly tried to get in touch with me, but I ended up having an argument with her about her constant interference in my life. She was upset and stopped calling me. I felt bad, but was too fed up to deal with her. I started hating home, especially Dad and Julia for giving Grandma stress at the age that she could not handle it. I wanted them out of my sight. But before I could decide on my life ahead, things took a different turn. One day, I found Dad coming home late at night, drunk, with a group of people who were telling him something that seemed like an ultimatum or a last warning. I could not understand much, but the impact was things that have turned less bitter at home since then. Julia makes my favorite meals and talks to me nicely. She's been treating me better and stopped with her tantrums every day. I started being appreciative of the initiative to make efforts to improve things between us. But at times she was overdoing things, like trying to give me unnecessary compliments or suggestions without even asking, or I don't know, try asking me how I'm doing in my job or career every day. I believe that she might want to know more about me, but I did not feel comfortable enough to share things with her, and I did not understand why she was so clingy at times that I had to remind her that I needed my own space. And Dad, he sometimes behaves so strangely that he looks worried and tense. I sometimes ask my dad what happened or why Julia had become so considerate toward me. He replied to me that since Grandma had passed, life had become rough for him, and he was starting to appreciate what he had in life, especially me. Thus wants to make things better for me as promised to Grandmother. I was wondering if this was actually the reason. Because of so many years of getting mistreated, lashed on frequently, receiving tantrums, I was not used to this normal behavior. I got a little emotional, feeling that Dad might actually change after Grandma left us. Maybe he still wants me as his son. But the hope shattered soon, and I'm thankful for the fact that I saw the reality. One night, I woke up due to some noises. It was arguing, and a lot of talking and chit-chat. I got up to have a glass of water and saw Julia and Dad discussing arguing over something, and they stopped when they saw me, instantly almost. I could not listen to the entire thing to make sense of it, so I called Layla just to tell her everything. but since it was late, she didn't answer. She was asleep. So I left her a text message. I was anxious the entire night, regretting my fight with her and also feeling the need to have the appointment earlier. The next morning, I asked them what went wrong. Julia seemed a little bit nervous for the first time, asking me if I've slept well, and I should not bother with petty things, but rather focus on myself. She also showed her concern for my mental state, saying I should avoid overthinking things. Layla texted back, saying she went on a trip due to some work and could not reply as she was stuck in a slow fall, and the network was so darn weak. She would contact me ASAP, and I don't know, I just wished her a safe journey, and I thought of going with the flow, just to know what would happen next. I am relieved that I have her in my life. Update number 2. Hey guys, I need your suggestions on this one. Am I being pessimistic or too skeptical towards my own people? After 2 days, I waited for Layla to come back so that I could discuss what was happening around me. Getting impatient, I tried calling her once, and her voice was not clear and she could not understand much, but she only advised me to be patient and stay careful to get a better conclusion. And I thanked her. A few words were more than enough to think through the situation. I became observant of Julia because she was getting clingier. So I played smart, testing her patience, knowing Julia's reckless behavior and that she might drop her act of nice ties soon. I began to make more mess or nitpick the mistakes she's made, judge her cooking, and start getting bratty to know how far she could take it. On the other hand, Dad was also becoming more anxious with each passing day. One day, he would have a rough day, lashing out at Julia. She was almost on the verge of losing patience, and to accelerate it further, trying to act clumsy, I dropped her favorite vase, and there she lost it. She yelled at me and started throwing tantrums, saying that she was only tolerating me because Grandma had transferred her entire things under my name. Otherwise, she would not have thought twice before throwing me out of the house. Stunned by the revelation, I discovered the reason behind the change in her behavior. That confirmed my suspicion, and Dad tried to reason with me, even saying that Julia was hyper. That's why she uttered such things out of pure anger. I asked him if that was true, and he later confessed that she was partly right, as he had been getting some threats and ultimatums in the last few weeks since he was under a certain debt, and releasing that Grandma has given all her wealth and property under my name. Only I could help him with that. He said that he was aware that things were not the best in terms between us, but he had no malign intentions. He actually wanted to make things better ever since he had promised Grandma to take care of me. And he also expects me to help him out because honestly, why do I have as a family in my life after Grandma? Technically, no one, so what would I do with such a big house? Live and die alone? Well, he was not entirely wrong. Dad told me that he would not pressure me, not at all, and well, I just wanted to give it some thought. He also added that he would appreciate it if I would help him out with this. I asked for some time to think about it, and he was glad to give it, but he did not have much of it left. So he wanted to know my answer within a week, and I'm asking, what did you guys suggest? Update number 3. Hey guys, thanks for your suggestions. Well, it turned out I was right. Thinking about Dad's words was a little harsh, that I would be all alone because I had no one. This thought made me feel anxious about my situation. I wanted to have a talk with Layla. She did not pick up the call again, and she said that she was busy. My anxiety was worsening, and I thought of getting therapy since it's been so long. I haven't had a single session since Grandma passed. Getting therapy would also declutter the thoughts that have been racing through my mind. I tried calling the therapist, but when his secretary picked up, she hung up on me, saying that the doctor had handed over another case since I've been absent for a long time. So appointments are not available yet, and I can only get them after 3 weeks. I could not wait that long. Dad, looking at me getting tense, asked if he could offer some help. I didn't know if I could trust him, but I could trust the doctor, so I told him about the problem. He was more than eager to help me, considering that I was helping him with his debt, so that he could also return the favor to his son. And this was not a big deal for him. He called some people, pulled a few strings, and he came back in an hour and a half and told me that he had arranged a doctor. Well, so that he could come to the hospital since the department head of the psychiatrist ward was his known acquaintance. It was easier for him to schedule my appointment. I thanked him, and he dropped me off at the hospital, and I got my session, and the session went nicely. But it tangled my mind further. The doctor stressed that being social, caring, and selfless to others might help me with my issues, and hinted at the importance of family. He gave me pills and said I needed to take them on the regular. He rejected the previous report, saying that I needed a regular visit for at least 4 to 5 days, so he could make new reports as the old ones were no longer reliable. When I came back home, I found Julia worried and feeling helpless, telling me that my dad was getting threats and that they had become more dangerous. She cried, saying that she had no one except him in her life. Dad told Julia not to give me anxiety right after attending the session and advised me to take my medicine like told. Julia and Dad kept reminding me to take them and take them and take them, and if I even get 5 minutes late to take them or tend to forget something, he questions me about how careless I am, how incapable I am of taking care of myself, and how I would survive the cruelty of the world with such a sensitive mental condition. He constantly keeps reminding me of my mother and grandma from time to time, how I lost them, and how it's hard when you have no one to rely on. On the other hand, my anxiety was worsening. I started to have panic attacks, and my day started looking concerned for me. Julia and my dad are constantly advising me that I need their 24-hour attention because of my mental condition. When I tried to contact Layla, she said that she wanted me to discuss everything alone since she doesn't trust my parents. So I planned to meet her after the doctor's appointment. And was my imagination getting wilder, or was I getting hallucinations that I was left all alone? I had no one, absolutely no one besides me. One day I reached earlier than expected and found the doctor was already talking to Dad on the phone, giving him assurance that the work would be done in 1 to 2 days. When he found me present at the moment, he looked a little nervous. I asked if he was free so we could begin my session earlier. I've lost so much trust in him. My dad and Julia as well. I did not pay attention to his session and let him talk, and I lied about everything that he expected me to do so that he could hand over my reports earlier than expected, rather than waiting for a day or two. While on my way back home, I just wondered about my condition worsening, so I went ahead to Google my medicine. They were the ones that were causing me hallucinations and anxiety, and it slowly started making sense why Julia and Dad were becoming overly concerned with my timely consumption of my medicine, and why my anxiety was worsening instead of getting better. But if Dad had a talk with me about helping him with his debt already, then were they playing such games with me? Why? I instantly reached out to Layla and told her everything that I've discovered. She suggested that I come to her place, and I asked her where she had been for so long, and she told me the whole story about how she was stuck in the snow, then later found that she had to empty her apartment and had to find another room overnight, so she shifted here for the time being. And she introduced me to her roommate who was a lawyer named Mia. Seeing the opportunity, I shared everything with them. The lawyer suggested that I gather the proof of prescription and the will of my grandmother, where everything was named under me. After getting hold of evidence of their misdeeds, it would be better to confront them, and I understood the assignment and headed home. Julia and Dad waited for me, asking where I had been for so long. It took more than half an hour to reach them, so I told them that I went to meet Layla on my way. Julia and my dad disapproved of me visiting my friends. Well, I didn't bother to argue with them. I just shut the door and waited for them to go to sleep so I could proceed with my plan. It was midnight. I sneaked into Dad's study's room and found the papers of debt with contacts of his debtors. And the most important thing is the will, under my name, signed by Grandma. I got a hold of it, and all of a sudden the room was lit brightly and Dad was standing there questioning me about what I was doing. He found that I've taken the will, and I was caught red-handed and was ready to confront him. He told me to sign those papers and hand over the percentage of my share to him. But I refused. After being played upon, I did not want to help him with anything. Furious, he locked me inside his study. The next morning, he had a meeting with his lawyer and asked me to do the same thing again, or I would get nothing. But I was determined. He handed over the document to me, showing me that I was mentally unstable and had lost my right over the property that had been given to my grandmother. I was thrown out of the house. Oh, so now I understand how my defective mental condition is related to my ownership of property. Guys, I want them to be caught. I know I can go to the police, but I want them to be embarrassed for what they've done to me. Update number 4. Hey, I'm updating you after a week. I've had a foolproof plan, and I was looking forward to exposing them, so here's how it went. I was fuming with anger, blaming myself for being foolish to believe in them, not knowing where to go, and I head towards Layla for her roommate's suggestion. Mia. She suggested I get my diagnosis done with a genuine doctor, as written proof of my current mental condition. I reached another doctor, made an appointment, got my checkup done, and got my news report that declared I was on the wrong medication previously and was given antidepressants to heal the damage done. Also, the report stated that I was suffering from mild depression, but due to recent consumption of the wrong medicine, which had the opposite effect on me, it would take some time to get my health back to normal. I told Mia that my dad and stepmother tried to frame me as mentally unstable to get the entire estate under their control. So I filed a case against them for mental harassment, including manipulation through the doctors and medications. Also, to catch them red-handed and get a hold of my previous medical reports, I had to wait to meet them at the right moment. And that opportunity was coming the next evening, as Julia and Dad were organizing a party to celebrate their marriage anniversary. I made all the arrangements to get Layla into the party so she could get into my house to find the previous medical records and reports of the basis of which I had declared mentally unsound. By the time she gets a hold of the evidence, she'll call me to come in, and she will keep the camera ready to record Julia and Dad's interaction. As soon as she called me all prepared, I barged into the party, and my reckless and patient mother said the exact thing that was most expected. "How dare you come here when I was not invited when I was thrown out of the property 2 days ago?" Dad, drunk, made fun of me, saying psychos like me are not invited as they would just get all panicky. I belong in an asylum. They made the mistake of not getting admitted there, and, well, I saw Layla with a camera in her hand standing behind me recording everything. I replied to Dad that I had come to wish him a happy marriage with a gift. I opened the gates where he found his debtors standing in front of him. His hangover washed away in an instant, and I handed him the papers where I had charged him in the case of mental harassment with invading my property and throwing me out of my own house, along with the evidence as a statement that was recorded by Layla. At the court, they confessed that they've tried to manipulate me through the doctor that they had set up by appointing the one who would work for them, and he would get paid and promoted in return. When they found the older doctor had been handling another case, they took that as an opportunity and started giving the wrong medication with the help of a doctor. Also, when their plan leaked due to Julia's reckless behavior, they both tried to manipulate me while I was given time to think, as they did not want to risk my mind getting better. I was being kept deliberately away from my limited social circle so that I would feel isolated and not confide in others. Meanwhile, even if I ever changed my mind and manipulation did not work, they always had a backup plan to use my fake medical reports of my mental instability to take over my property. I realized why Grandma refused to give a single penny to Dad and Julia after going through a hellish experience. The doctor's license was canceled and Dad and Julia were sued, and property rights were handed back to me. Though this wasn't easy while suffering from constant anxiety and panic attacks, even hallucinations. With Layla's support and her roommate Mia, I would not be able to get justice, and I'm forever thankful for them.
So this story was very deep. There was a lot to it, and I just honestly cannot believe how OP's father can treat his own kid. I mean, trying to steal everything from OP, trying to frame OP with the wrong medicine, making OP have even worse anxiety, deeper depression, and just going through a hellish time, all for the sake of inheritance and money, is absolutely absurd and wild. And I just can't help but think, what would the grandma do if she was still on this earth and she could witness the horrible things that her son was being a part of? It makes you wonder. Guys, let's discuss this story in the comment section down below. If you're new to the channel, my name's Mr. Reddito. I narrate stories every day. I hope you guys enjoyed this one. I'll see you in the next one, but do remember one thing. You never know what someone's going through in life, so it's cool to be kind. I'll see you later. Peace.